Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
This is Stress-Free Living. Good morning. I'm Ray Samich and I'd like to introduce everybody to my longtime colleague, co-host, and dear friend and brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
I'm okay, except we're both not telling the truth. And since we are all about truth, we need to be truthful with our audience. You're a little under the weather today.
No,
and,
I'm not. It's my body. I'm perfectly all right.
There you go. Your being is perfectly strong. Yes, you are correct in the clarification.
After 26 years of doing the show, you didn't catch that.
Yes, it took me a while. I'm a little slow today. It's early, but you are correct. Your body is a little bit under the weather. Your being is perfect as always. Yes. And my being is also a little under the weather. I'm just kind of under an allergy.
Not your being, your body is.
My body. You know, doggone it. If we weren't live, I could do a take two on this whole thing, but we're live, so it is what it is. So my body is also being attacked by allergies here today. You may hear it in my voice. I'm prone to have that happen over the course of the next hour, I think, because people say I talk too much anyway, but especially if I'm a little bit under the weather, it may come out improperly. So we have invited, we've got a panel of our Zoom guests that are with us from all across the country and around the world. We are so delighted that we have them all the time. And we have invited them, if they would like to participate, to do that. They can raise their hand through their reactions and give us their comments on anything that you and I are talking about. And one of our Zoom guests that has been with us regularly is Pradam, and he is a professor, and we have especially invited him to pitch in, especially if you see us failing. Now, if you see me saying something stupid, I don't have to be failing physically. I can just be failing emotionally or intellectually. Then please, Pradam, please cut me off and come on in, because that may also happen today as usual. Speaking of Zoom, we do want to tell all of our listeners that you are welcome to be a part of that. We would love to send you our Zoom link so that you can join us and we can talk with you in between the show and after the show as part of our special audience. So we'd love to have you if you'd like to participate. And if you also want to catch us on replay, we are on YouTube on our own Stress-Free Living radio channel. So you can go out and catch over 50 shows that we have had over the last couple of years. Now, we started doing that with the start of the pandemic, and I guess there's silver linings out there if you look hard enough for them. That's one of the silver linings of this terrible pandemic, is that we were able to start going to a Zoom format and record all of the shows. So please feel free to do that too on our channel. All right, enough of that. Ratanjit, we talked last week about violence. We started talking about that. The question that we asked was, is violence in our DNA? And I think while we discussed that there are many people that do feel it is, our consensus was that it really isn't. We feel that we're actually more prone to love and be kind and share, but many factors, the environment, the upbringing, a number of other things kind of cause us to often resort to violence and defer to that. But in the show, we really needed to have a better understanding of why we are violent. And especially in our post-show, Dr. Jagjit, who is with us again here today, pointed out a number of things that he has done research on violence. And we welcome his comments here today, of course. But there really is more to it. I mean, we have to understand when we are seeing it on the news and experiencing it in our lives every day, whether it's domestic violence between couples that are together and know each other for years, or whether it's random massive violence that we're seeing out portrayed in office buildings and schools and churches and everywhere else. It is just so much around us. Ratanjit, let's start with your overview. Over the last week, as you've known, we were going to be talking about this, and you've been maybe paying attention even more than usual to violence that happens, that is reported on the news. What's your take right now? Is there something that we can do as individuals? You know, they all talk about legislation for all kinds of things, but if people want to be violent, they're still going to be violent. They're going to find ways of carrying out the acts of violence. We have to touch people's hearts. We have to change them. How do you think that we can put us on the right track to do that?
Well, before we go there, I would like to say that today your body and my body is behaving violently. It is because it has somehow got some poison within it. Maybe I got a virus, or maybe your allergies are showing up. So it is the reaction of the poison within the body which body reacts. So the poison, when it is physical, when the poison is mental, Ray, the body thinks violently. So that addresses the second question for society. When my body has 105 temperature and I'm almost not completely and coughing like crazy, and so my doctor has to confine me to a place where they can treat me, they can give me some treatments. Now, when your body is more violent, and if you are having a severe pain, or if you have a situation or a tremendous virus within you, if you have COVID, of a serious case of COVID, then the hospital has to confine you because your body is reacting to the poison in the body. So if we have violence inside us, it is going to show us outside of us. Ultimately, it is that foreign thought, erroneous thought, or a thought which inflates your ego, your minimizes you, or somehow you feel hurt, then you have this reaction of violence.
So if that logic follows, then the reason why we are seeing such a flare-up of violence around us in the streets and everywhere is because there's more violence within us as individuals right now. There's more of the virus of violence, if you will, that is within us. There's more people that are afflicted with this, and the net result is that there's more people out there that are showing it. Is that a logical assumption?
So what happens is, if you, in your worldly sense, if you feel marginalized, if you feel cheated, if you are incorrectly hurt, or somebody has taken advantage of you, so natural reaction is the anger, which is really a poison inside the system. So you want to react. Your body becomes angry and you become violent with that thought. And then if you don't have logical thinking within you, or somebody around you who can make you think logically, who can address those feelings, you may go into depression, you may go into loneliness, you may go into a a situation where you end up nurturing this inside, and then you begin to see the whole world with a colored glass of hate, colored glass of marginalized. So everything starts to appear that everybody is against you. And at that time, you really end up reacting, ultimately killing people, shooting yourself, and all that.
Ram, what do you think? What's your take on this whole thing? Is the violence within us before we show violence outside of us?
Thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm very grateful for the invitation. My take on violence was shaped very much by the perspectives of Osho, an Indian mystic who left behind a legacy of over 2,000 books. And he highlighted the centrality or the role of self-hate. And his belief was that we grow up in a society where we tend to criticize each other a lot. Particularly when we are children, we have very powerful individuals, powerful because as a child, you're relatively powerless and the grown-ups have a lot of power over you, telling you 1,000 ways in which you're broken. You know, the way you hold your fork is not right. Why did you spill your food? You need to be eating more nicely. You know, the way you didn't make your bed today. You're not friendly enough and polite enough with your friends. And this is not the way you talk to grown-ups. And so there's a lot of condemnation that we keep heaping up. Some of us are bullied in school and all of this. So many of the cumulative effect of all these experiences is to leave us with a tremendous experience of self-hate. Many of us hate ourselves for who we are. We don't accept ourselves. And this self-hate is ultimately gets projected outside. Osho held the view that our relationship with ourselves is a reflection of how we treat ourselves, is a reflection of how we treat others, and what we are doing to others is a reflection of what we are doing to ourselves. And his famous phrase was that when there is a war going on inside you, the enemy merely appears outside. So I would tend to say that as a result of experiences, and some individuals have it much harder than others, we internalize a lot of self-hate. And when we hate ourselves, we tend to project it onto others. And I also would endorse a systems perspective on violence as opposed to the individual perspective. The individual perspective always only focuses on those individuals who snap and who commit the violent act. The systems perspective says that these might be the most vulnerable individuals where the symptom becomes manifest. But you have to understand the totality of a system in order to be able to understand the etiology and the genesis of any phenomenon. So just like talk about the opposite of violence, let's talk about great acts of altruism or scientific discovery or contribution to humanity. There's a book publisher who contacted me sometimes back asking me to write a book, and I didn't accept the offer. I didn't have the time. He said, can you analyze the last 50 or 100 Nobel Prizes that have been awarded and show that the whole idea of a Nobel Prize is an absurdity? That any of the people who were awarded Nobel Prizes, there were hundreds and hundreds of people who were behind that, either in terms of raising and caregiving this person or in terms of incremental scientific and literary contributions. So a Nobel Prize winner is the highly visible manifestation, but there's literally a community behind any single achievement. Similarly, there is also a community behind any violent outburst. What we might say is one individual snapping, but we should not forget both longitudinally, meaning over time, whatever has happened, and the number of different relationships and all of these that have been internalized by the person. So it's convenient to see violence as an individual act because we like to locate responsibility in an individual and believe that if we punish that individual, we are going to solve the problem. But as Osho reminded us, that's another issue. When you send a person to prison for his violent behavior, what you end up doing is actually, do you think you're going to reduce that person's violence by sending them to prison? Or do you think you're going to make them even more violent? The chances are that they will emerge even more violent. And therefore, unfortunately, many of the societal ways in which we have been dealing with violence are based on an idea of an individual having gone astray, which misses the depth of the subterranean network of exchanges, reciprocal exchanges, the entire system that breeds violence. So the individual is just like the symptom out there and easily identifiable. And also our ways of dealing with violence are unfortunately going to be promoting more violence, directly or indirectly.
One of the thoughts I've noticed is that we've talked so much on this show about our own insecurity, because most of us are very, very insecure. All of us, I think, are somewhat insecure, but some of us and more of us are very insecure. Today, there's more ability to get validation on any thought that we have, on any feelings that we have. We can so easily reach out and find a group on the internet. We don't have to look in our neighborhood. We don't have to, I do agree that our immediate environment is important, but we don't have to rely on the people we can see and touch. We can find people that agree with pretty much any thought so easily to validate what we believe inside. And once we have that validation, we no longer feel insecure about that thought process, because I'm right. And right now, I think political violence is at we're watching, as this show is being done live, we're watching the hearings on January 6th in the United States, and the millions of people that are watching that. And I look at the hearings that are going on, and it doesn't matter, I don't want to make this political, it doesn't matter if I'm extreme right, extreme left, or anywhere in the middle. All it's doing, in my opinion, is validating your thought process wherever you already are at in your feelings about what happened. And so the people that are mad one way or another about it, they're angry about it, they're being validated that now, see, everything I said is true. And now they're going to be more prone to violence along those thought processes. It just seems that I don't know, if you want to find someone to tell me that I'm right, I can find somebody who tells me I'm right. And then now I have, the anger is magnified, because now I believe that I can take action on what my belief is. Am I logical on this? What do you think? Either of you, or anybody here on the panel?
Paramji, can you make a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our primordial aggressions are buttressed and reinforced by selective perception. And I think you're absolutely right. We all think we are living in one world, but we are living in 1,000 different worlds. And we have our own internal architecture of rationalizations and worldview. And you're right. And when there's polarization in a society or on a matter, we tend to gravitate towards our opinion, and we get entrenched in it. And from that stance of entrenchment, we selectively process the information, and we end up consolidating our own point of view and further deepening the extent of polarization. So I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things that has been ignored in violence, in the management of violence, is awareness. So if you don't mind my launching into a brief autobiographical confession here, I had become an emotionally abusive person myself over several years. And I want to talk a little bit about my recovery from being emotionally abusive to what people say is a dramatic 180-degree transformation, only because it's very easy to talk about violence in the abstract and make it be about other people. And I think in any of these phenomena, it is probably productive of more insight and wisdom when we don't ask, how come this person is so violent? But we look within and say, where in my life have I been violent? And how can I expand my awareness of the underlying dynamics of violence? Because in any way, just as they say that you can understand the nature of the ocean by drinking a cup of water from any of the oceans, in the same way we can understand each other by diving into ourselves. It's the Eastern view that the entire dynamics of the world are contained in our own lives. We don't have to look any further. If I want to find out why there's poverty, I need to look within me. If I want to find out why there's violence, I need to look within me. So I want to cut to the chase.
I need to interrupt you for 1 second. We definitely want to hear that story, because I do agree most profoundly that if we have your own personal example, it's not hearsay, it's right from your heart and your own experience. But we do need to take a break first. So let's do that so I don't interrupt you during your autobiographical recant here, because we definitely want to hear that properly. This is Stress-Free Living. We are continuing our discussion on violence, how to end it, how to change the trend in our country, and in our world for the violence. It's just around us more and more every day. Can we learn more about why and how, and make that change in our lives and in others' lives? We hope so. We'll be back and continue this discussion in just a moment. All right. I apologize for cutting you off there, Param, but I didn't want to do that 2 minutes into your
that
story.
was a much needed intervention. No apology needed.
Okay. So we have just a moment here for anybody. Good to have so many of you with us here today. We enjoy having you. We hope that this will be a good, healthy discussion.
I'm grateful to Param to save me, because my throat is not working. So,
it's a pleasure to be of help.
Yeah. Somebody.
Oh, there's okay.
Rahul ji has raised his hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rahul has raised your hand. Go ahead, speak, Rahul. We have a moment. Please speak.
Yeah, good evening to everyone from this side of world. So I was talking to one very well-informed person about violence and the war and everything, right? He has shared another perspective. He said, if you look at all the innovations humanity has done, most of those came from those, post-war world. So how do we look at violence in that perspective as a cumulative society? Probably that's one way. I mean, that's one view I got.
I didn't understand that. I apologize.
He's saying that a lot of world and not a lot of wars have initiated us to discover new technology, new ways, which ultimately have been used by humanity. So as
right, for example, internet came from that time. Probably ammonia came from that time, which used for fertilizer, or maybe more things.
Yeah, atomic bomb also came from that.
True.
Yeah, I guess we can find silver linings, like I mentioned earlier, the pandemic, but I don't think the silver linings justify the. But thank you for that. We may bring that in.
Yeah,
we are back on Stress-Free Living. We appreciate so much you being with us here today, and we hope that we are adding some value to your life and eliminating some of the stress. Stress is certainly rampant today in our world with the violence that is around us. It seems to be at every corner and just giving us a little bit of a fear no matter where we go. And Ratanjit and I were talking as we started here, before we started the program, the broadcast, we really just talked about how we are skeptical of trusting and believing the honesty of pretty much everybody around us now. It used to be that we trusted you until you proved that you couldn't be trustworthy. And now I think it is flipped around. I think you have to prove that you're trustworthy before we trust you. If I meet you for the first time, unfortunately, I'm more prone to say you're probably not honest. And boy, what a different, terrible outlook, if that is true, we are having in our society. And I think it leads to some of the mistrust and the violence that is happening around us. Param, let's get to you before I talk away the segment. You're going to be kind enough to share your personal situation, albeit I'm sure you're not proud that you've been there, but you certainly should be very proud that you have evolved from that. Please share what you experience in your life.
Yes, thank you. So I want to preface this by saying that from the time I was 16 till the time I was 30, for about 14 years, I had a dermatological condition that would leave me with as many as 100 or 150 abscesses on my face, back, and chest every day. So there'd be blood and pus flowing down my face for 14 years. And one of the things that happens during those years, during those sensitive years of teenage years and stuff, you want to look your best, you want to appear attractive, you want to appear suave and confident. But to have this much of disfiguration on my face was something that was very embarrassing. So also remember that I would have internalized a lot of people staring at me, bullying me perhaps, or seeing me as somebody who is likely to transmit a contagious illness and therefore a source of threat to their well-being. And perhaps, and I know I'm being a pop psychologist here in presenting this theory, perhaps as a cumulative effect of all of these and a number of other factors, I discovered that sometime in my 30s that I had become an emotionally abusive individual. And it is so fascinating because I would wear a mask where to the most of my colleagues and my students, they would see me as the nicest person because I used to be so kind and polite. But to the people in my innermost circle, I used to be emotionally abusive to them. And this is one of the challenges, right, of identifying violence, because aggression in its multiform manifestation, sometimes it can be concealed under a lot of masks. You know, some of the nicest people around us who we see as very nice people are perhaps wearing a mask of politeness. Often your true character and the state of your psyche and your aggressiveness and all that is projected only in your most intimate relationships. And that usually remains a best kept secret. It was only when I started reading the works of the Indian mystic Osho that I began to realize that I was leading a false life, a duality where on the one hand I would be very polite and to everybody outside in social and business situations, but I was actually an emotionally abusive person. Now, there are two paths when you realize that you're a violent person, an aggressive person, call it what you want. And I know that emotional abusiveness doesn't sound like violent, but it is aggression nonetheless in one form or the other. One path says, is for me to condemn myself and to criticize myself and to make a New Year resolution saying, beginning this year, I will not be emotionally abusive to anybody. I hate the fact that I'm emotionally abusive. Now, when I condemn myself for being emotionally abusive, I'm likely to increase the magnitude of entrapped aggression within me already. The self-hate just increases by the condemnation. In the Eastern traditions, you call it Taoism, Tantra, Zen, there is an alternative path. It's a very gentle path. It says, when you see something that you hate about yourself, don't do anything about it. Don't change it. Just accept it. Now that appears completely illogical. How can I accept myself for being an emotionally abusive person who's been hurting others? But I personally worked through this process and saw the benefits of it. So the first step is get some insight into why you became that way. So if I had all this aggression and anger trapped within me, why did I become that way? Playing back the scenes from my childhood, understanding those moments of mortification, perhaps, and all of that which I suppressed, the anger that I suppressed. So one is acquire some insight. The second most important part is to have compassion. You can recognize that in the predicament of being somebody who abuses others, it's very easy for me to develop compassion towards others, much harder for me to have compassion for myself. Compassion for myself. And third, accepting myself that I am an emotionally abusive person, not moving readily towards trying to fix it, deepening my awareness of it. That awareness is the key to transcending violence. And the reason I'm bringing this up, you might say, what relevance does your story have to this discussion on violence? I think it has a tremendous relevance in terms of how we decide to relate to and manage this phenomenon of violence. I think the biggest contribution we can make to ameliorating violence in society is to treat children, to have compassion for themselves, to love themselves for who they are and for who they are not. Because when you are reinforcing a child's ability to understand himself, accept himself, have compassion for himself, even if he goes through a phase where others are bullying him, as is likely to happen in a cruel world where others are mean to him, if you have planted the seed of self-love, of self-compassion within the child, the chances are that it'll act as a buffer. It'll act to reduce the intensity of that self-hate, which means that the chances that the person will take it out on somebody else in a very violent and aggressive way are significantly reduced. But unfortunately, our socialization practices teach people not only do we judge others, but we also treat them to be self-judgmental. And I think that's the first stepping stone of violence, the first step towards how we get there. Osho used a phrase called unsobbed tears. Unsobbed tears are the tears that you never sobbed. So when something has happened to you and you have been really sad, if you allow yourself to cry, you're not likely to accumulate the sadness. But unfortunately, because we tend to move away from sadness, we suppress all these moments of sadness, shame, disappointment. And whatever we haven't allowed ourselves to deeply experience gets trapped within us. And I would say we have to teach children to be able to relate to and manage these unsobbed tears. And that would be a societal way. We need to redefine how society relates to children and the kind of attitudes that we instill in them.
Excellent.
You're talking about parenting from an entirely different perspective than we currently are doing. Because as a parent, I think for the most part, we see our child behaving badly. And so our immediate response is to try to discipline them and have them understand that they did badly and that they need to do better or they need to do differently. And that's probably, if in your line of thought, it's probably just increasing their self-hate at that point if I take that direction towards them, because they're not being in any way reassured how good they are. They're being reassured that they're bad. So it's just, if that's the way that we take it. But I mean, how do we, and maybe I'll ask Ratanjit on this. Ratanjit, if I'm the parent now that needs to do what Param has suggested, how do I put that combination of teaching discipline, teaching them the right way of doing things, but also doing it in such a way that actually builds their self-esteem and their self-love? It seems contradictory.
See, what we do is we confuse our behavior and our habits as me. So we categorically say you are a bad person, but we don't say that, look, you are a divine being, you are perfect, you have compassion, you have love. But if you don't watch the habits you have, see, it's like if you haven't had a bath, it doesn't, if you are wearing dirty clothes, it doesn't make you dirty. Your clothes are dirty, right? So if we make a child aware, and that's where the self-love comes in, that the real you is flawless, because that real you, which brings life in you, is a divine force. And that force is flawless. But the data you have gathered, and as a consequence, the habits which you have picked up are erroneous. And those are going to give you consequence. So if you practice this habit, this is going to be the consequence. Do you want this consequence? So now you have not condemned the person. You have not condemned the child. You always saying, it's the same management principle. If you want to manage people, you have to catch them doing something right first. And say specifically, instead of saying you are a great person, say, John, you have done this particular act in such a detail. These are the details. It is very good. It's excellent. But now, if you bring this creativity in this work, why don't you bring the same creativity in this work? So you have not criticized that person. You have asked him to utilize the same excellence somewhere else rather than. So that is how I see it. And self-love, Ray, until we love this human structure, mistake this human being as me, somebody is always going to be more handsome than you. Somebody is going to be taller than you. Somebody is going to be. So there are qualities which can always make you inferior. But the power which enlivens you is flawless. So if we tell the children that you are flawless, the real you is flawless. But now you have to have habits which are also good. Right?
You know, obviously, the whole show has been based on the real us, who we really are inside. But over all the years that we've done this show, I don't know if I've ever realized how important that was for parenting, to understand that, to really grasp that when we're teaching our children. Because children, you gave an example, Ratanjit, about doing your best work and in an office environment. When you're an adult, I think you can logically process, okay, I can do better. This wasn't good, but I can do better. I have it within me to do better, and not be offended by the criticism. I mean, it's still prone to take that personally, but I can still, as an adult, process that. But as a child, I am so eager to learn everything and experience everything and feel everything. And I take everything so deeply as a young child, because everything is new, that if my parents yell at me, very often I'm really going to take that very emotionally. And if I'm already in a state of no self-love, as Param talked about, and now I get that coming back to me, even if my parent is also saying, you know, you can do better, and I know I've seen you do better, but this time you didn't do well. I'm still thinking I'm bad. I have a problem. There's something wrong with me. I'm not able to do what I should be doing. But if you bring up the fact that our habits are not who we are, if you are coming from an approach that said you are a perfect being, you are flawless, and you need just to understand that your body is different and it's going to have good habits and bad habits, and you're in total control of which way you're going to develop your body. To me, that is just, it's so empowering to teach that to my children. I wish I would have, to let you know that you're starting perfect and you can always be perfect if you just control your habits.
Absolutely.
Param, what's your take on all that?
Well, that's a very great point. I think I have, I have been like an armchair anthropologist. I have traveled widely around the world and just noticed families, communities that are very peaceful and loving, and compared them with cultures, families, communities where you see a lot of violence. And I know I'm oversimplifying this, because any topic like this, the causes are very complex, and for any one of us to claim that we have that kernel of insight that represents the whole truth would be foolish. But I have to say that there's one thing I have found. Osho talks about a classic situation that most of us face while growing up. You have a parent looking at you, telling you, I want you to be successful. I want you to get good grades. I want you to win trophies and prizes. He says in that moment, when a parent is exhorting his child to higher levels of achievement, two things are happening. One, the child is hearing he should get good grades, he should do well in school and all of that. But there's another message that's being communicated implicitly right at that moment. And Osho says, you're telling the child who you are, just the way you are is not good enough for me. I reject you for who you are, but if you achieve, then you become acceptable to me. So this is the genesis of the internal self-condemner. Osho calls it the internal condemner. He says, if I ask you to sit under the tree and just enjoy the sunshine for half an hour, most of us on this show will not be able to do that. Because within half an hour, there'll be a voice that will tell us, will condemn us. It'll say, you're not working hard enough. I'm not taking the clothes. You should be taking the clothes to the dry cleaner. You should be catching up on your taxes. You haven't done this. You haven't done that. It's almost like we carry the introjected, internalized voice of condemnation of our parents that continues to live within us. So what happens through all of our socialization is that these ideals are held up to us with very well-intentioned teachers and schools and parents and all of that. But every ideal of, that is held up to us, to Osho, is actually dividing the child, because a part of the child that's able to attain the ideal is, loves the fact that he can do that. But a part of him that's anxious about not attaining the ideal, or that fails to attain the ideal, starts hating himself. And this is one of the challenges. The most peaceful societies I've seen are where children get the message, who you are, just the way you are, is beautiful and divine. And they are not under that internal pressure of having to please somebody outside, and therefore carry with it the possibility of falling short and all the self-hate that is there. I think Ratanjit makes a very powerful distinction between the behavior of the person and the being of the person. Most of the time we are not aware of this, because most of us as parents have not done the inner work that we need to do in order to work through all the anger and hostility and all of that, the unsolved tears that we ourselves carry. So we end up becoming, we may have grown in our bodies, we may be 50, 60 years old, but emotionally we still remain children, just as impulsive. And it's just that, we have a tremendous desire to control children, and it's very efficient to beat children, admonish them, yell at them, and get their behavior under control. And I think one of the fundamental errors that we have made in raising children is the emphasis on behavior. Because I see too many parents, the only thing that we are concerned about is how the child is behaving. We are not too concerned with the inner life of the child, with the subjective experience of the child. So if you have a system of behavioral control that is only attending to behavior, if your child doesn't seem to be behaving in a weird way or is not embarrassing you, you're not really paying attention to what's going on inside. And I would put it to you that being concerned with the inner life of children, with their subjective feelings, their thoughts, that's where you have to be paying attention, because our systems of behavioral control, and that's why you have repeatedly this situation of a person who seems completely polite, compliant, he was just quiet, and we don't know why he snapped, because we seldom take the trouble to inquire into the subjective experience of people unless they're creating a problem for us.
I think we are really making some progress here today. Thank you for all of the wisdom that is coming forth, and something to really think about and digest. We are going to come back in just a moment. We need to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and try to see if we can wrap this up a little bit. And just as a little tease, I'd like to add the element of hope, because if I was, and we're talking about children a lot, but even if I'm an adult and if I've already don't have this self-love, if I really do have this self-hate that has been built up and built up, I think I lose hope. I lose hope that I can ever be anything more than I view myself now, I feel myself to be. And if I've lost hope, it's just dawning on me that there really is no reason to live. There really is no reason to try to change, because I have no belief at all that I could ever be anything better. So I'd like to leave with that and let you both think about that. Is how can we give our children and our adults at any age more hope that there is a brighter future for them, that there is a way that they can change their habits, that they can be compassionate, loving people in our society. Perhaps that's one word that is lacking for all of these people that are committing such acts of violence is that they have lost their hope. Is that a way to try to help our society? We're going to come back and try to wrap this all up into one tight little bundle when we return on Stress-Free Living. Please stay with us. All right, we have a very short break here, and then we want to let everybody know, don't run away at the end of the show if you would like to comment on anything, or if you have a quick comment right now that you'd like us to work into the show or a question. We will have about 10 minutes left. Anyone have any thoughts?
So, Ray,
Everybody's speechless. Oh, there we go, Doug. Go ahead, Doug.
So just real quick, we can talk more about it later, but obviously being a parent is very tough situation. To do the right thing. My goodness, when do you tell them that they're great and then say, but you have to do this, that? I mean, there's certain things that they do need to be disciplined, and they do have to realize that, hey, I can't get away with everything. Hey, I have got to abide by some of the stuff. So it's a tough way to balance to be a parent. There's no question about it. So many of your shows talk about the importance of parenting to develop children, but have other thoughts about that too that we'll talk about after the show.
You are right. It is difficult to balance that, no question. Rahul, do you have a quick comment? We have just a few seconds.
So I would like to suggest two topics to be covered in coming session. One is how, in India specifically, I'm facing this problem. How to choose, let kids choose the career. That's one topic I want you to cover. And second is, sir, how we can be in a state of abundance. How we can live in a state of abundance. Just two topics if you can cover in coming sessions. This is Abhishek.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. We can do those for future shows. I don't think we'll be able to fit. They're a little bit off the topic here today, but we will for sure consider those for the future. Thank you. We are back on Stress-Free Living. Ratanjit and Ray, Param, and a whole slate of characters that we love having together with us. And I use characters very affectionately in my choice of words there because we have individuals that join us on our Zoom calls that are just so passionate and intellectual and emotional and such a valuable part of our program each week that if you're just listening on the radio, you don't get to catch the beauty and the wonder of that. So we certainly thank them for being an inspiration to us and also giving us great thoughts and ideas to share with the rest of our audience here on the radio. I left the last segment, Ratanjit, with the idea of hope. And I wanted to come back with that. It is, faith, hope, and love, you hear those three words and we all know what love is and we all know what faith is, but I don't know if we think much about hope. It's just dawned on me as I was hearing both of you speak that in this situation, if we don't have hope that we really can do better, that we really are capable of becoming loving, giving people in the world, why bother? I mean, and most of the violence is done by people who want to lose their own lives, who almost think they're going to go out in a blaze of glory with this violent act, and they know without a doubt that their own life is going to change. They're either going to end up in jail for the rest of their life or they're going to be killed, and they usually want to be killed. So to me, it seems like if they've lost all hope, it's understandable that they have taken that path because there's no reason to live. What do you think about that? Ratanjit, start with you.
Yeah, it's one thing which we don't have enough time. I think we covered that many times earlier. The word is called acceptance, which is most difficult to understand, comprehend, and implement. And acceptance is what we do in our society is totally opposite of that. We don't accept the condition we are in, and consider that an opportunity to a challenge to improve upon. The medicine does not change. Medicine is compassion and love and kindness. Because if we use punishment, we have filled our jails. We are only 4% in this nation as a population of the world. We have 25% of the prisoners, and we do not cure them. We do not change them. So idea is, oh, this person is violent, he has killed. So there was a close friend of mine who was a psychologist. She worked with these criminals in the jail and taught them self-love. And she was amazed to see the transformation taking place in them. Many of them completed their masters and PhDs while they were in jail. And so you can transform human beings, but before any situation can be helped, we have to begin with accepting, just like a doctor accepts a patient's condition, it doesn't punish them, and then going forward cures and uses the medicine which would cure the disease. The medicine for violence and anger and all that is compassion, is kindness, is love, right?
What am I accepting, Ratanjit? And if I'm prone to violence, if I am, maybe I've even acted on violence, what am I accepting that I missed the connection on that? What is the acceptance of?
Well, see, if you see a violent person, we immediately judge them. We immediately want to capture them and put them in jail. So acceptance starts with us. If we teach children, youngsters in college and home, understanding this acceptance, so what happens is when we fail, that failure lives with us. When somebody criticizes, that criticism lives with us and completely minimizes us, and pretty soon we are so angry going forward. And in the part of acceptance is also accepting the power which enlivens you. And until that core acceptance is made, all the other acceptance don't work.
Yes, right? that definitely, that part definitely makes sense. Param, when you gave us your autobiography, and we only have 2 minutes here, you actually did say accepted. You accepted the fact that you had behaved badly, and you accepted that. That, you know, alcoholism, of course, is the biggest well-known situation around the world, where they say you have to accept that you are an alcoholic before you can move forward on it. So I'm sure you would agree with Ratanjit on this, is kind of accepting where you stand right now as a launching pad, and not ignoring it, not hiding it.
There's a French adage that says anything that you resist will persist. So if I condemn and reject myself for being an emotionally abusive person and just judge myself, I'm pushing against it. And that way of resisting it will actually empower and produce the opposite consequence. Anything that you resist shall persist. It's only when I can come to the first step for any recovery is to accept that I have become an emotionally volatile or abusive person, and to accept that. It doesn't mean that I won't change it, but it's accepting it even so that I can start becoming aware of the deeper roots of the situation, of the issue, of the symptom, whatever it is that I'm focusing on. It begins with self-acceptance. And when I can accept myself and not condemn myself, because when I condemn myself, I'm resisting it. And by resisting it, it becomes even more entrenched. I'd love to explain that in more detail. There's a very elaborate Eastern rationale for this principle of self-acceptance as the paradoxical path to total transformation. but it calls for
I
another
think-
discussion.
And I think we need to do that because we have still, we've done a lot of talking about it, and I think a lot of understanding, but we have much more to learn about violence and how to overcome that. So perhaps that self-acceptance and a greater understanding, as Ratanjit said, of the separation of our being and our bodily habits certainly is a big part of this discussion as well. It has been a wonderful discussion, and I want to thank each of you. Param, Ratanjit, as always, your love, your wisdom, even if your body isn't behaving here today, your mind is doing perfectly well. So we appreciate all of your thoughts and the input from our other guests as well. And most of all, from all of you for being on the other sides of your computers, your radios, whatever it might be. We appreciate you and value. Hope that we've added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.